We're constantly being told that the truth is stranger than fiction. And what we don't understand is that all these illustrations and animations and definitions, even me speaking now, are simply us trying to define and explain and bring reason to the truth that is stranger than fiction. And what you will find is that no matter how much man tries to illustrate or describe or to define, we'll never be able to, because the truth is far more stranger than any fiction man can come up with. In fact, as long as man is naturally trying to define or grasp or understand its own self, you'll be constantly doing a repetitive motion, a hamster wheel, around in a circle with yourself. Because what you find is when you really understand what the self is and what the meaning of infinite means, it allows you to see that you'll never truly understand what the self is, and this veil or the next veil, and that's part of the game. The I don't know and the mystery is what keeps the whole game going. So we may get more in depth or more answers peeled back from the onion, right? We may get more into depth on our research and our understanding of what the self is, but the fact is we will never be able to fully understand what the self actually is, because you never can. Why? Because the self is everything and nothing at the same time, simultaneously, and this is something that the human mind will never be able to comprehend. How can everything be nothing and nothing be everything at one time? And it's very simple. If everything, everyone, is a product of God, how can you be a product of God without being the actual one? And this is a question I propose that no one has yet been able to answer. Because even in religion, in the comfort of religion, you're acknowledging that everything came from one source, from one thing. The only thing that you're not acknowledging is that everything is this one thing. We're creating this illusion that everything created from this one thing remains and lasts forever on after. It doesn't converge back to the one, it stays on in this form forever. And that's the ego, wishing to cling on, hang on, and hold on for dear life, because the ego does not want to part ways. There is no such thing as birth, and there is no such thing as death. And that's what we need to realize right now. Just as there's no such thing as reality, and there's no such thing as a fiction or fake. We wouldn't know the difference between real and fake. We've never seen anything real. We've never seen anything fake. All this is a marvelous hallucination, a projection, a hologram. And if something is a hologram or a projection, that means it's not really there. And when we think of everything on a linear scale, beginning and end, left and right, forward and back, we'll never grasp the understandings of time, because we're viewing time on a remote linear scale. And what we're not seeing is that every single thing that's happened, any event that's happened, any person that's been born, whether they died 200 years ago, if we're referring to time according to events, they could have died 200 years ago, but the fact of the matter is they're still now. Everything is the now, because everything is the point. Everything is the point. Time is not on a linear scale. Time is on a point, a dot. Picture a dot projecting out in every single way, like a sun, illuminating out. That's how time works. It illuminates out in all directions and repeats itself in a fractal pattern, meaning it comes back around again to find itself. And this is how time works. So no thing is separate from another. No person is separate from another. The Egyptian era that happened, that I'm reading about, happening several hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, is happening right now as I speak. You reading about past events that you think have already happened, again, you're thinking they've already happened because you're looking at history from a linear scale. Instead, what we can do, when we're reading about history or historians, realize you're reading about your own self, your own past, in another veil that you've marvelously forgotten. This is you're reading about. You want to research the past because you want to research yourself. You want to get more in depth with what you were doing and what you were before this veil. And so to some, history is the most important subject. Because you can't know the future unless you know the past. So some feel it's vital. Let's go back and see what's happened. See what can go wrong. Because history repeats, right? But again, what we're not realizing is any time, any date, any person that we're reading about is ourselves in the now. Because that's how time works. It's a point, not a line. So anything that you're reading about that's happened is happening now. In the very moment that you're reading it and taking it in. Because everything is now. There is no BC and there is no AD. That's a part of the duality, which is a part of the Maya, which is the illusion. And the Buddha is the man who awakened from the illusion. That's all the Buddha means. Buddha was a man just like me and you, who came to the same realization. Buddha was me. And a past veil realizing himself, becoming a Buddha. Awakening from the grand illusion of things. And the grand illusion is there is no duality. Where you have two polar opposites, they are being split by one source, one singularity. And this is the game of forgetting, of pretending singularity. This is why we put off singularity. This is why we prolong ourselves. Because singularity is inevitable and irrefutable, and it's a fact that we know in the very back of our minds. And it's not something we can fight. We can put it off as long as we want, and go into an anxious and depressive cycle, right? Where we can realize and see liberation. Realize the self. That all the evil that you're focusing on in the world is nothing other than you, the self, in another veil. And if you notice, every evil story has a story to it, has a reason as to why, has an explanation. And that's why good and evil are a matter of perceptions. It's a matter of a point of view. I've said this before. You can switch anything in duality with each other, and they'll still work the same. So it's literally not it's a matter of perception with duality. But it's key to understand that it's all part of the illusion. The two are not real. It is a part of the very illusion. Just as your very two eyes are. They're helping you forget singularity, which is why we have two sides of our brains which are polar opposites. One side is logic, science. The other side is fantasy and mystical and magic. See? And right there within your own brain, you're split into two polar opposites that compete against each other between faith and logic. And that's the classic battle between science and spirituality. Because they're exactly opposite. It's hard joining the two together. But when you take DMT, you can balance the two hemispheres of the brain together, see into them both as one, and connect them both as one for the first time. Instead of having them both compete against each other and say, well, some people are saying, I won't believe this if I can't prove it, if I don't see that it's true, which is the fact. And some people will say, no, I believe this because it says so in this book, or because my faith says so, or because this says so. So I believe. And that's the faith. And to the people who are in faith, the people who are into the facts are crazy. And to the people who are into the facts, the people who are into the faith are crazy. And they're both just calling each other crazy back and forth. And there is no medium between the two. And that's why we're split into polar opposites. You see? We're eliminating the medium, the middle, the void. At least we're making ourselves forget. We're forgetting that all shapes, any geometric shape you can think of, began from a center point. You didn't have a triangle until you had a center point. Until you have a center point or a point, period, you have no creation. The point is all there is and all there ever will be. And as I said, it's infinitely casting itself out while converging back in on itself. And that's the creation and destruction flux being created perpetually, forever. But there is no such thing as birthing or death. And I say this because we were not consciously aware, meaning me speaking right now, being consciously aware that I'm speaking, and I'm consciously aware that I'm aware. I was not consciously aware when I was coming out of my mother's womb. I was not consciously aware being pushed out, saying I am being pushed out of a void, out of a womb, out of a blackness, and I'm being birthed into a physical image. So just as you weren't conscious or awakened, we can say, when you were coming out of the womb, the birthing cycle, you will not be conscious or aware, if you will, in the same sense you are now during death. Because the two are one and the same, and you would not know the difference between being birthed or dying. Because they're both an illusion, they're not real. You were never birthed and you were never dead. You don't die, you transfer, we're infinite. And this is the great realization of self. You have no bounds, you have no confines, you have no limits. You're everything in existence. Anything you can possibly think of, you are. The very structures surrounding you right now that has a wall and a floor and a ceiling around you, you're it. You're the whole room around you. You're the matrix. You're the body and the matrix. You're the body and the organism that both play the role, the yin and the yang, that keep this thing going. And the 10% of our brains we're using is only allowing us to be 10% of aware of ourselves in the body, in the microorganism, and not the macroorganism. That's all the 10% means in our brains. We're only 10% aware